Chloe is watering and sweeping the yard when her work is finished and she goes to their dog and says that she should go to the bathroom and then she rushes into the living room and goes upstairs. She plays soothing music and reads along with it, puts the broom and the bucket and tries to tidy up the house faster when suddenly her sister calls her and says that it is almost 1 o'clock and she has to hurry up, so Chloe collects the dirty clothes and says she will come now. Then she rushes downstairs and takes the key and tells their dog, whose name is Boris, to stay there until she comes back, and then gets out of the house with a hurry. She runs out, and when she comes back, her sister tells her that Fermin has called and she rushes to the phone. Her sister is cooking food upstairs, and when Chloe finishes her call and she goes to her sister to prepare the dishes. Adela, Chloe's sister, curiously tells her what Fermin said and did they date. But Chloe says that it was a normal conversation and he is just a friend, and she continues to tell her sister that you introduced him to me. Adela said that she was joking and had the intention of messing with her. Suddenly the doorbell rings and Chloe rushes to open the door. And then Mrs. Sofía, grandmother and children enter and go to the dining table and sit down and talk about the events of their day. Cleo calls Adela and tells her that the children want strawberries. And then, taking the tray of strawberries from Adela's hand, and she goes to Mrs. Sofía and the children. At the same time, Mrs. Sofía told Cleo that she should take 2 hands of her husband's coat and pants to dry because her husband intends to go on a trip and she needs to gather his things. The children ask where the father is going to go. And Ms. Sofía says that he is going to Quebec for a conference, and then the children discuss where Quebec is, and one of them says that Quebec is in Canada. After the meal, Cleo goes to the back of the roof to wash the clothes and the children go up with her. Cleo tells them that their mother has already gone to the back of the roof and that they should return faster and take care of themselves so that they don't fall to the ground. After washing the clothes, Cleo goes downstairs, and after hearing the sound of Mr. Antonia's car horn from behind the door, she runs to the door to open the door for the doctor, and the children and Mrs. Sofía also go to meet their father. The doctor comes, and after parking the car and he enters the living room and hugs the children, and together with his wife and children, they go inside the house and watch a movie together and laugh. Cleo brings strawberries to the doctor and then they sit next to their 6-person family to watch a movie. Mrs. Sofía wants Chloe to bring a cup of tea for a doctor. One of the children, who likes Chloe very much and usually plays with her, said that Chloe should stay with us. After kissing her on the forehead, the mother says that Chloe is coming to us now. When Chloe goes to the kitchen and she sees her sister washing the dishes. She asks Adela to prepare chamomile tea for doctor and continue to wash the dishes herself. After the movie, Chloe and Sophie pray together and Sophie goes to sleep, and Chloe turns off the electricity and comes out and asks Tonia, who is lying on the bed, to sleep, and then goes to Pep's room. She changes his clothes and puts his to bed with kindness and then goes down the stairs. At the same time, Mrs. Sofía and the doctor were talking to each other, and the doctor talks to his wife about the dirtiness of the house, and Mrs. Sofía closes the door in the room so that Chloe does not hear their voices and does not get upset. Chloe turns off the lights and goes to the room where her sister is ironing the clothes. It is Chloe tells Adela to turn off the electricity because Mrs. Tersa doesn't like the electricity to be on and says that she is probably watching them now. She lights a candle and then the two of them with a smile do some exercise before going to bed to get rid of the bruises on their bodies. The next morning, Cleo and Adela compete with each other to go to the restaurant and meet Fermin. After eating a bite and talking a little, Ramon and her aunt order to go to the cinema and watch a movie. Ramon says that I am in a hurry to see the preview, and then they went to the cinema with Adela. After calculating with Fermin, Chloe also goes to the cinema, which was a little ahead of the restaurant. Before going to the cinema, Fermin suggests that they go somewhere else and says that he is not interested in the movie, and Cleo agrees, and then the two of them go to Fermin's house and Fermin does karate moves for Cleo. Cleo was happy about the existence of Fermin. The next day, Cleo woke up with the sound of a bell, took a shower, Dawn and gently woke up Sophie and Paco, and then she prepared the children's breakfast and put them in their bags, and breakfast was served to grandmother, Mrs. Sofía and Mr. Antonia, and gently put the pep on the table. After getting ready, the children boarded the bus with their big mother to go to school. Cleo accompanied them and after praying to God, entered the house and gave her breakfast. When she went to the kitchen and she saw that her sister had just woken up. Adela said to her, "Why didn't you wake me up, sister?" And Chloe said that if you wake up earlier, you will be tired, dear, and then she asked her to prepare breakfast for Dr. Antonia. Then, Cleo took Dr. Antonia's bags from the doctor and took them to put them in the trunk of the car. Chloe along with Dr. Antonia's wife and his son and they say goodbye to him. Mrs. Sofía and Pep are going to school and Cleo is busy cleaning. There are dog droppings in the yard. The next day, Cleo went to the cinema with Fermin. Fermin left her on the pretext of going to the laundry and Cleo was very upset, and after waiting for a few minutes in a busy market, she returned home and kept talking about the movie and how Fermin leave her, and she was thinking that her sister came to her and gave her a tray of sugar tea and told her to take it to Mrs. Sofía and her mother. Adela stayed in the kitchen and looked hale from behind the kitchen. Cleo put a tray of tea on the table and then told Mrs. Sofía that she wants to talk to her, and Mrs. Sofía agreed and said, "After you call the children to come home from under the hail, then come and talk with me." Mrs. Sofía gathers the children around her and tells them that they want to go to their uncle's house for Christmas, and the children are happy and say, "When will their father come?" In response, Mrs. Sofía says that she doesn't know either, and then she asks the children to write a letter to their father and ask him to come back as soon as possible. Mrs. Sofía sends the children to their rooms and then sits Chloe next to her and asks her how she is and says, "What's the problem?" Chloe says with discomfort that she feels pregnant. Mrs. Sofía caresses Chloe's shoulder and wants her to calm down and asks who is the father of the child. Cleo says, "Fermin, the cousin of Adela's boyfriend." Mrs. Sofía asks if her father knows that you are pregnant. And then Chloe says that her father left her alone, and then she worriedly says to Mrs. Sofía, "Are you going to fire me now?" While caressing Chloe's hair, Mrs. Sofía says that "Don't worry about this, I do not expel you, so I have to take you to the doctor," and then she hugs Chloe and says with regret that she is a poor girl, that Pep will come and give his painting to his mother. He shows and says why Chloe is crying. In response, the mother says that Chloe's stomach hurts, and then Pep hugs Chloe and puts his hand on Chloe's stomach and asks her to go because of the pain. Then Mrs. Sofía and Chloe get in the car to go to the hospital. On the way, Miss Sofía collides with two cars and the doors on both sides of the car fall in and the body of the car is damaged. After the police came and determined the extent of the damage to the two cars, they went to the hospital. In Mrs. Sofía's hospital, and she sees Dr. Margarita and hugs her, and after asking about her condition, the doctor takes Chloe for an examination, and Miss Sofía also goes to see Dr. Zabala and talk to him about her husband. Dr. Margarita, after asking a few questions of Cleo, examines her and says that Cleo is pregnant for 3 months and her baby will be born at the end of June, and then they both went to Mrs. Yasif. The doctor told Mrs. Sofía that Chloe should rest a little so that she can feel better. Mrs. Sofía tells Chloe to go and look after the babies until her talk with Dr. Zabala is over. Chloe was looking after the babies when the earthquake hit and the ward nurses had to move the babies to a safer place. Mrs. Sofía talked to Dr. Zabala all the time about the fact that her husband left and did not even call the children. She said that she was very worried. Mrs. Sofía goes home with Chloe after the hospital and prepares the children to go to their aunt's house for Christmas. After a long distance, they reach their uncle's house. Ms. Sofía and the children are very happy and hug each other when they meet with the uncle's family. Cleo takes the bags with another servant towards the room where the bags are supposed to be placed. As they run, Cleo bags puts each of the children on a bed when suddenly her eyes fall on the heads of several dogs which are installed on the wall like paintings. The servant explains that these dogs are the same dogs that have been in this house since the beginning, and every dog that dies, so they put its head on the wall. Under each of the dogs, the name and year of their death were written. Then Chloe goes to the surrounding green space with other people to have fun. The children run after them and play. At the same time, one of the men raises a gun and asks the ladies to go shooting, but they don't show any desire, and Mrs. Sofía says that Ms. Wesley is a good shooter, but the man said that she is an American. And then one of the ladies got up to go shooting. Ms. Wesley tries to teach others the principles of shooting in her own American language. After the shooting, they go to a house where many animals were taxied and the whole house was decorated with Christmas items and beautiful music was playing. The children were playing together and suddenly someone dressed as a bear and entered the house. They made the song happier and everyone started dancing together. The servant took Chloe's hand and asked her to go with her. Chloe repeatedly asked where he was taking her, but the servant did not answer and only said, "Don't be mistrustful," and then he took her to another place where Christmas was celebrated. There were many people there who were happy and celebrating the new year. The servant poured a little confetti for Chloe and then asked her to celebrate until the beginning of 1971. When Cleo wanted to go back to the previous party, she saw Sofía alone while she was watching a scene from the balcony. Mrs. Sofía looked upset and returned to the party when she saw Chloe. Chloe went to the balcony and was looking at the view in front of her from the balcony when she suddenly saw a man shouting that the forest was on fire and everyone should help and get water. Everyone went together to help put out the forest fire. The new year started while they were putting out the fire. The next morning, while the children were playing in the forest, Chloe went up the mountain with one of the servants. Chloe said that I miss our village, even though I feel better in our village. After that celebration, on a rainy day, Mrs. Sofía's family and her mother and children returned home. At the table, the children were discussing going to the cinema when suddenly the phone rang. Cleo answered the phone and told Miss Sofía that Ms. Molly was behind the line. After dinner, grandmother decided to take all the children to the cinema. On the way, the children were talking about the movie and everyone gave an opinion and everyone was eager to see the movie. They run in the way of the children and the grandmother is not their rival. Tonio went so far that Cleo had to run after him and found him after a few minutes of running. Chloe told Tonio that his grandmother is waiting and worried, and Chloe asked Tonio to go with them and prepare a ticket. The next day, Cleo boarded the bus to go to the address he had from Fermin. On the way, she asked several people for the address and when she reached her destination and she saw Fermin's cousin. Ramon said to Chloe, "What is she doing there?" And Chloe said that she brought Fermin's jacket to deliver him. He takes up the jacket and says, "Well, go now." But Chloe says that she intends to talk to Fermin, but Fermin's cousin says that they are practicing music now and don't have time. Chloe said that Adela told her that he is her boyfriend. Finally, he helps her to find the Fermin. Ramon told his friend to take them with his car to the place where he is training with Fermin, and then he wants Cleo not to tell Fermin that he took Cleo there. Cleo accepts and gets into Ramon's friend's car and goes to find Fermin. There were some people practicing karate in a large dirt ground, when suddenly Professor Zovek came to teach them. Chloe is surprised to see the professor and asks those around him if the professor always comes here. And they answer that he only comes to teach sometimes. The professor started talking and said that everyone has a potential power that can be brought to life through physical exercise, but the most important thing is to strengthen mental and spiritual forces. The only miracle is in the will of people. He said that the mind is the motor for the human body and then he asked to perform a show. He said that this show requires high physical and mental concentration. He said that only lamas and masters of formal arts and some great athletes could do this, and then he asked one of the athletes to come and close his eyes so that he could not see anywhere. After closing our eyes, the professor put his hands above his head. He takes it and ties it, and then he raises one leg and stands without moving. In the crowd, he mumbles what the professor is doing, but then the professor said, "And you didn't expect me to fly like a plane or hang in space." He said that you can do this too, you just have to close your eyes. Athletes and some viewers tried to do that, but many of them did not succeed. Then karate practitioners put their sticks in a bucket and go to rest. Fermin and his friends were talking about the difficulty of sports and the coach's ethics, etc. When suddenly Cleo called Fermin from behind and asked him if he had time to talk to him for a minute. Fermin goes to Chloe, greets her and then asks her to tell the reason for being there. Chloe says that she has written and sent letters to him several times, but has not been able to find Fermin and get an answer. Fermin said that his work is very busy and about the new and Olympic teacher spoke and then asked Chloe, "Who brought you here?" Cleo said that the brother-in-law of one of the neighbors works in front of the company and he gave the address to Cleo. Fermin realized that his cousin, Ramon, had taken Chloe there, but Chloe said no with a little hesitation. Fermin continued and said that Ramon will not die unless I touch him. Cleo told him that she is pregnant, but Fermin said it is not possible. Fermin said that if you want to not hurt yourself and the child, don't talk about being pregnant anymore, and then he made a few moves to scare Cleo, and when she left the club, she called him a substitute servant and left in a hurry. The next day, while Cleo was cleaning the table, at the same time, she heard the voice of Miss Sofía, who was crying and talking on the phone, saying that her husband had been gone for 6 months and had not returned home. She says that he doesn't have money and he won't send money to them, but this is a lie because Antonia has recently become interested in diving and buys diving equipment which is very expensive. At the same time, Paco hears his mother's voice. He comes down the stairs and goes to stand behind Fulgus's room. Cleo was calling Paco to come to her, but Paco didn't listen. After finishing her call, Miss Sofía noticed Paco's presence and came out angrily and slapped her son on the cheek, then immediately hugged him and apologized and then turned her face to Chloe and said that you were here, why didn't you stop Paco? Mrs. Sofía told Paco not to say anything to his sister and brother, and Paco, while his face was wet from his tears, accepted his mother's words and went upstairs to play train with the other children. Pep disturbed them and said that he wants to play with them but they did not accept, and their discussion became more serious, and the grandmother tried to reconcile the children. Sophie went upstairs and put Chloe's clothes in the drawer, then Sophie found her and told her to come and calm the children down. After giving peace to the children, Cleo went to the kitchen to wash the dishes and talk to her sister. Adela told her that the government went to their village and took over her mother's land. Adela asked Chloe to go to her mother and then she took the dishes from her and said, go rest in the room, I will continue the dishes and do the rest, and open the door for Mrs. Sofía. After opening the door, Miss Sofía entered the house with her car and rammed her car against the door and the wall and stopped the car at the parking lot. At the kitchen, she was upset, then she said to Cleo, women are always alone. The next day, Chloe, her grandmother, and Mr. Driver go to buy a bed for Chloe's baby. On the way, they see the students who are protesting, and in a part of the street, they see the parade of soldiers who are among the students. After arriving at the store and choosing a suitable bed, they wait for the store owner to get a discount from the manager and return. At the same time, the street turns into a place where students and soldiers eat. Cleo and the grandmother are looking down from the shop window with discomfort. One of the students enters the store and asks for help. One of the sellers grabbed his hand and tried to hide him when some soldiers entered and drew weapons on the people and angrily went to the student and killed him with a bullet and then left the store. Fermin was also among them. Fermin had taken a weapon from the grandmother and Cleo and was looking at them with surprise, and he left the store earlier than all the armed people. At the same time, Cleo's water bag broke due to her fear and sadness, and it was time for her baby to be born. The grandmother, accompanied by a man, took Cleo to the car and went to the hospital after the traffic was over. Dr. Wells came and took him in a wheelchair. The lady who worked at the reception asked the grandmother to tell her Chloe's characteristics. The grandmother was very worried and told them that she did not know anything. Chloe went to the delivery room with Dr. Wells, and the doctor examined Chloe, and then they hurriedly took Chloe to the operating room to give birth to her child. Dr. Wells said that it is an urgent matter and there is not even a chance to change the clothes. Dr. Wells wants a pediatrician to go there because without a pediatrician the work will be difficult. Dr. Wells tried to calm Chloe down and soothe her with his words. Unfortunately, the pediatrician came late and examined the baby Chloe who was born, but there was no heartbeat. The pediatrician tried to resuscitate the baby and Chloe, and Dr. Wells was taking out the pear from Chloe's stomach and sewing them up. The pediatrician came to Chloe and said that he is sorry and that they have tried everything, but the baby Chloe is not showing any reaction and is dead. Cleo with all the pain that had tolerated, but Chloe became more upset and cried when she heard that her child was dead. To calm down her, the doctor told her that you want to hug your child. Chloe hugged her lifeless baby and was crying. The doctor told her that her baby was a girl. The doctor asked her to take care of her child. The doctor took Chloe's baby from her and asked the nurse to prepare and bury her. The nurse wrapped the baby Chloe in a white cloth. Dr. Wells told the nurses to explain to Chloe's family about her physical and mental condition. The next morning, Chloe was sitting on the balcony, upset and sad, looking at her lessons and her dog, Boris, when she heard the sound of the car's Sophie. Adela opened the door. The children went to their mother and saw that she had bought a new car. One of the children asked Ms. Sofía if her father knew, and Ms. Sofía said that she wanted to surprise the children's father. Mrs. Sofía said that as God's protection from the car, they will go around with her for the last time. Mrs. Sofía invited Chloe to go with them, and the children were happy and went to Chloe and hugged her, but Chloe pointed to Mrs. Sofía and said that she will not go with them. Mrs. Sofía insisted more and said that it is good for her to go around, and then she told the children that Chloe is coming around with us and we should not ask her to work. Adela caressed her sister's shoulder and said, "Go sister, I will do the housework." And then Chloe accepted. Adela said to her sister, go and change your spirit, and then she went to help Mrs. Sofía and the children in gathering supplies. They should sit by the beach, but Mrs. Sofía said that they should go to the hotel, and after the insistence of many children, she agreed and kept the car. The children and Mrs. Sofía and Chloe got out of the car and went to the sea. Chloe stood in a corner and did not go further. Sophie came and said to go to the sea with them, but Chloe did not know how to swim and did not go with them and said that they only see them from afar. The children and Mrs. Sofía entered the sea and were happy together. At night, after swimming in the sea, they went to the hotel, and on the way they were talking about how much they liked it and they love it again. They were going to the beach, but Cleo, she was still silent and did not say anything. When they entered the hotel, they went to the bathroom and Chloe changed her clothes and Mrs. Sofía was disinfecting the wounds on Paco's body that had been created under the sun. In the morning, they went to a restaurant to eat there. At the table, Mrs. Sofía told the children to listen carefully to her words, because she wanted to tell them something important. Mrs. Sofía started and said that your father is not from Ottawa and he had not gone anywhere and he was only on a business trip for a week. Mrs. Sofía said that Antonia doesn't come home anymore and the reason for them to visit her is for their father to go and collect his belongings. Paco said to his mother, "Do they want to get a divorce? Did Sophie say that my father doesn't love us anymore?" Mrs. Sofía caressed her daughter and said of course that she loves us and wants to see you. The children started crying and their happy faces turned into sad faces. Mrs. Sofía continued her words with strength and tried to calm her children. She said that one day things will change and we will always be together and we will enter into an adventure. Ms. Sofía said that she is going to work full-time in a publishing office. Did Paco say publications? Didn't you study chemistry? Mrs. Sofía said that her father did not send money and the money for teaching is not enough and she has to go to work and said that she loves books and never liked chemistry. After the meal, Mrs. Sofía buys ice cream for the children and they sit in a corner next to each other and eat their ice cream in silence. The next day, Mrs. Sofía took the children to the sea to play on the beach and then she went to look at the tires of the car. She told the children that they should return tomorrow morning. Mrs. Sofía told the children to play near the beach and then asked Chloe to take care of them. When Ms. Sofía left, Pep threw himself on the beach and his body was full of sand, and Chloe went to clean Pep and called Sophie and Paco. She called and told them to swim only near the beach. Pep was talking to Chloe about his dream of being a sailor and drowning. Chloe told Pep to sit there and didn't move until Chloe came back. Chloe went to Paco and Sophie to tell them that they should swim near the pool and then entered the sea to reach Sophie and Paco. She found Paco and Chloe who were about to drown and took them to the beach. Sophie was coughing loudly and then Mrs. Sofía comes and thanks Chloe for saving her children's lives. Chloe cried and said that I didn't want that child to be born, she had no fault. Mrs. Sofía wanted to calm Chloe down and told her that she loves her very much. The next morning, they returned home. On the way back the car was very quiet and no one said anything. Cleo hugged Sophie and Pep. Mrs. Sophie was driving and Tanya and Paco were looking from the window of the sedan. Tooth. When they reached the house, everyone took off their bags and greeted Adela and Boris and entered the house and everyone gave an opinion about the house. One said that likes libraries and another said that he doesn't and then they all went to say hello to the grandmother and the grandmother kissed them all and was happy to see them. The children saw their new rooms and were happy when suddenly Mrs. Molly called and Mrs. Sofía went to talk to her. The children were explaining their trip to the grandmother. Chloe was collecting the clothes and Adela went to buy a hamburger.